I'm curious for you, looking at the landscape of the Big 12 overall. I mean, I'll pull up the preseason poll right now, but you look at the bottom right, Texas Tech, West Virginia, TCU. I think those are kind of the three games that I have my eye on. But, for you, just starting big picture for the Big 12 as a whole, who are the teams you have an eye on saying, ooh, this might be a down year for them, a coaching change could come? Now, a lot of coaching changes last year, so maybe not as many spots for that. But just big picture for the Big 12, kind of what do you see this conference filling out in terms of maybe tiers or just the different levels of the program?
Yeah, so I think that for me, when you look at teams that I think Kansas could legitimately have a shot at, I really look at that West Virginia game in week 2. It's going to be tough because it's so early in the year. I almost feel like you'd want to get them later when they could be potentially going through a coaching change, for example. But I do think that West Virginia is going to be a pretty key game for them. Certainly in out of conference play, the Duke game I think is going to be huge, and then Texas Tech, TCU. I think that these are games where you at least want to be competitive, even if you can't win them. What in terms of splitting the Big 12 into tiers, like this is going to be a crazy year. I think that there could be as many as 5 teams who compete to play in the Big 12 championship game. Baylor, Oklahoma, of course, the top 2. They're the teams who have won the conference most recently. Oklahoma State, I think, has a great shot of making their way back to the Big 12 championship game after last year. Texas, I think that you have to look at what they've added, of course, and they're going to be a very offensive-centric team, but they have some of the best playmakers in the country, so we'll kind of see what works itself out there. And I think that people are really sleeping on Kansas State. I mean, Kansas State arguably has the best offensive and defensive player in the Big 12 with running back Deuce Vaughn and defensive end Felix Anudike-Uzomah. So they had the most preseason all Big 12 selections with 6. I don't know what people are missing on them. I mean, all of the, you put together your preseason all Big 12 team, you put together your preseason awards picks, and everybody loves Kansas State, but then they think they're going to finish 5th. I don't think they're going to finish 5th. I think they're going to be pushing for 10 wins. I think they're going to be right there in that conversation at the end of the year. So I think that all 5 of those, if I had to pick, I'd probably put Baylor, Oklahoma State in the top tier. I think those other 2 in sort of a second tier. For me, Iowa State's kind of in a tier of its own. I think they'll be a step ahead of TCU, but probably a step behind everybody else. Kind of TCU, West Virginia in a tier, and then Texas Tech, and then Kansas probably. So it could all work out any sort of way. Like, I mean, I really kind of feel like, I would pick Kansas to finish 10th or 9th most likely, but almost anybody else can finish anywhere else. Like, it's going to be a crazy year, and I think it's going to make for one of the more fun years we've seen in a couple of years.
Yeah, I'm excited for the Big 12 title race overall. I'm curious for you, though, like you look at the bottom kind of 3 or 4 of the Big 12, under normal circumstances, I think you'd say, all right, Texas Tech, that seems like a game you might be able to win. But with that coming on the road, you do get TCU at home, which is nice. And then, of course, that West Virginia game. I'm curious just for you real quick on Texas Tech. With Joey McGuire and what they've done, I guess, where do you see them kind of fitting in? Because they're a team that in high school recruiting has done incredibly well. Right. For so long, they were in the top 10, top 25. They might still be in the top 25. But just for you this offseason, where's Texas Tech at? And where are they kind of entering the season at in terms of the broader picture of the Big 12?
They're going to be a team of chaos more than anything else this upcoming year. Zach Kittley comes over from Western Kentucky at offensive coordinator, and he's the guy who coordinated Bailey Zappi to have the most productive passing season in the history of college football. Now, I don't think it's going to be quite the same at Texas Tech. I think that Zach Kittley's pretty adaptable, and Texas Tech has some great tight ends. They've got 2 really, really good running backs, and they have a little bit of a dearth of talent at wide receiver relative to other years. So it's going to look a little different, but I think that they're going to be very dynamic offensively. The tough thing for them is that they're going to have to withstand that first half of their schedule, because they play North Carolina State and Houston in the non-conference slate, both of which could be top 15 teams in the country when they play them. They have a really tough early Big 12 slate. I believe they get Oklahoma and Texas really early, along with Kansas State. They might start the year like 1-5 just because of how the schedule works itself out. And I don't think that'll be representative of their quality. I think they could be improved relative to last year and still kind of have a tough record. So I think they're more going to try to play spoiler for a lot of the rest of the year. I I know that they get Oklahoma in their last game of the year. They get Baylor at home, which I think is going to be a huge game for them. And I'm curious to kind of see by the time that Kansas is playing them, are we seeing the best of Texas Tech or are we seeing the worst of Texas Tech? That's going to, I think, play a big part in it, whether Joey McGuire is able to kind of keep things on track, which I think he understands what's in front of him. I think that's going to be a big focus, is finishing the year strong because of what they have in front of them. But look, first-year head coach, obviously things can go off the rails, and certainly I think that Kansas also. I mean, Kansas beat Texas Tech a couple years ago, of course. Kansas also, I think, could just be able to win that game based on team quality. So it'll be a really good one, I think. Certainly, I wish that it was at home for Kansas instead of on the road. But certainly, I think that that's a game that Kansas should be competitive in.
Yeah, and real quick, if Kansas finishes 9th in the Big 12, who finishes 10th?
It's a good question. I think that probably Texas Tech would probably be the one who I think could finish 10th. I think West Virginia as well. I'm kind of worried about them. They have JT Daniels coming in. They've got Graham Harrell coming in at offensive coordinator. But JT Daniels has been hurt basically every year of his career. Graham Harrell, of course, was just let go at USC. And it's going to take some time, I think, to get things together. And defensively, they're going to be, I think, a lot softer than they've been the past couple of years. Even though Neil Brown was kind of like, no, that's what we do. I don't know. It's a lot to ask after losing 20 plus transfers across the roster. I mean, the most transferred team in the Big 12. So I'm a little worried that the West Virginia thing might not work out, and that by midseason, Neil Brown's maybe out of a job. And the other thing too is that Neil Brown has the worst schedule for a hot seat head coach that I've ever seen. He plays Pitt in the return of their backyard brawl rivalry in their first game on national TV on a Thursday. Everybody's going to be watching that game. And then in week 3, he gets Virginia Tech with the first-year head coach. If he were to lose those 2 games, that might be it. That really might be it for him. So, and certainly that Kansas game in week 2, I think will also be pivotal from that perspective for Neil Brown. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe things really start to click for West Virginia, but I certainly think that West Virginia and Texas Tech would probably be the 2 who would be right there in that conversation. Maybe things don't work out for TCU. I probably think that they're a little too talented to fall into that range. But again, I mean, somebody could easily fall off. Somebody could easily rise up, and it wouldn't surprise me that much.
I think it's a really good point with West Virginia. Like, it's the weird middle of 2 look-ahead games, right? The 2 rivalry games, and then you got Kansas in the middle. JT Daniels, are they going to hit the ground running? Like, that's the question I have.